Hello, hello, and welcome to the Cloud English Podcast. My name is Luke. It is Friday, November 8th, 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Today we're going to be talking about mistakes. We will be talking about mistakes, common mistakes, and how to avoid them as an English learner. We'll also be looking at a clip with the election results. The presidential election was this week. Donald Trump won, Kamala Harris lost. Those are the results. We'll look at a video and pick out some language from one of the announcements on the news. And if we have time, we may get to some phrasal verbs. We will see how that goes. If you haven't done so already, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also, get a free course in the links in the description. Much appreciated. If you would like, you can also check out my course about English learning mistakes. That is also in the description. Click on that link and you can get that course. It's a few solid hours talking through common mistakes that English learners make and how to fix those. Not exactly the ones we're talking about today. So I think a worthwhile, let's say, extension deep dive into the topic. Okay. Also get a free course, Natural English Conversations. That's in the link in the description. And you can get a discount on the website, 30% off the monthly membership. So that's the yearly membership price, but paid monthly. Ooh la la. Very nice. Good deal. I think so. Okay. All right. Let's get into it. We're going to cover our first topic, which is common mistakes. And then we're going to get into the video. If you have any questions, those watching live, let me know as we go. And those watching later, hello, welcome, thank you. If you're watching, you can listen, check out the links in the description there, or search Cloud English in any podcasting platform. And if you're listening and you'd like to watch live every Friday at 1 p.m., hopefully, around maybe 1 or 2. I did say 2, didn't I? Well, okay. 1 or 2 or 12 or something Friday, early afternoon. Let's go with early afternoon on Friday, okay? On YouTube, on Facebook. All right. Let's get into it, shall we? Shall we? Shall we? First, common mistakes. Common mistakes. I caught a mistake on the slide. And, ironically, a mistake on the slide about mistakes. And I had to fix it. And then I fixed it, and now we're back. So that's great. So here we go. What are some of the common things that English learners deal with? Sometimes it's a grammar mistake, and sometimes it's just something that's not supernatural. We'll start with subject-verb agreement. This is often something people know, and easy sometimes, difficult others. Sometimes you get it wrong because you know and you were just talking, and so because you're thinking about so many things, you said he go instead of he goes, not because you don't know that, but because you were thinking about other things. Whereas sometimes it is a little tricky. So the team is winning versus the team are winning. Well, generally, is winning is considered correct because team is what we call a collective noun. A collective noun. And if you hear someone say something like the team are winning or the group are, right? They should say probably is, but you will hear people say are if they're thinking of the team as a bunch of individuals. So I'm telling you, if you've got a collective noun, generally use the one that agrees with it as a single thing. It is a bunch of individuals, but it becomes a thing as a collective noun, right? The team is. If it's they, a bunch of people, then they are, right? So yes, you will hear people use are in this case, but it should be is, and that's the simplest way to remember it, because you're treating it as one. What about Neither of the options works versus neither of the options work. Well, what does neither mean? Neither means not this and not that. Not this, not that. Either means this or that. So it's one. It's not the same as both, right? Both is two. Two, usually. Always. Yeah, two, always. And so this we have to regard as one thing. So if it's one, then it's A or B. So we're either talking about A or B. So let's do it with A or B. A works. B works. A work. B work. Well, now suddenly it's very clear which one it is, right? So you just have to kind of simplify it for yourself and think through it. Neither works. Neither works. Now, what about this stuff in the middle? Well, options. Options, that's more than one. Shouldn't it be options work? No, because we're talking about this. The subject is this, and it needs to agree with this, or rather, this needs to agree with this. Neither. Not options, but this reference to one or the other. If it's just the options, then yes, it would be the options work. The options work. Oh, okay, great. Now we're talking about more than one thing, so it's the options work. But if it's neither or either, we're only talking about one thing. A or B, right? A or B. And so that's what makes it a bit confusing. Almost everyone enjoys relaxation. Almost everyone enjoy relaxation. Well, everyone would be people, right? So he, she, let's say. And so let's say he or she, because everyone refers to each person, right? Everyone, he or she. So he enjoys relaxation, she enjoys relaxation, and he enjoys relaxation, and Denise enjoys relaxation, right? And Tim enjoys relaxation. So we're pointing at everyone, and everyone enjoys relaxation. So again, same as this, right? We're referring to one. So it's enjoys. He enjoys. She enjoys. If we're talking about a group, right? Then we could maybe think of it differently, right? Well, then it would be what? They enjoy relaxation. So if I'm talking about the whole group of people, the people over there next to the beach, well, they enjoy relaxation. But we're not doing that because that's not what everyone means. It's you and you and you and you and you and you, right? I shouldn't say you. I should say him and him and him and him and her and her and her. That's very important, that distinction. Okay? So sometimes subject-verb agreement can be tricky, is what I'm trying to say. How about tenses? We can mix this up. This can be tricky. Number one, there are difficult tenses, right? There are tricky tenses, but also, again, you're just talking, you're thinking about pronunciation and your grammar and what you're trying to say and all of that stuff. It's easy to make mistakes. So there, the key is practice. So, okay, yesterday I went to the store and buy some groceries. Yesterday I went to the store and bought some groceries. I heard that only the first verb needs to be in the past. Is that right? No. It's two separate actions, although done by the same person, I. If you made it two sentences, then it would be easy. I went to the store. I bought some groceries, obviously. Well, it's the same. We're just sticking it together into one sentence with and, right? So it should be, it's the second one is correct. I went, I bought. When would it not be? If instead of and, you're using to, because to would then be, well, then it would be changing it a bit. It's no longer an action. Now it's the purpose of the first action, right? So there would be, yesterday I went to the store to buy some groceries. We can't say to bought, right? If you have a verb after to, it's always going to be the base form of the verb, okay? How about mixing up tenses? She was cooking while he plays video games. This is a really common one. She was cooking while he was playing video games. And we could also say while he played video games. It could be. So she was cooking while he plays. He plays would typically be something that he usually does. He plays video games every week with his friends, right? Something like that. If she's doing this in the past and he is also, then usually they should be the same tense. So if she was cooking, then he was playing video games. Now it's correct to say she was cooking while he played video games. That's okay. But the best way to do this is both of them in parallel. Two things happening while he was, right? She was cooking while he played, while he was playing video games. Okay. Now how about using the conditional? This is the if and the would. How do we do this? This is tricky, right? If I had known, I tell you. If I had known, I would have told you. For often conditionals where we're wondering about things and speaking, let's say, hypothetically, and you talk about the thing that, I can't avoid saying it, would have happened, you have to use this tense. Would have told. I would have told. Would have. Anytime you're speaking hypothetically, you're going to use a tense that shows you're speaking hypothetically. Did this happen? No. I didn't know. If I had known, I would have told you, but I didn't. So in this case, because I didn't know, I would say it like this, okay? I didn't know, so I didn't tell you, right? That would be a very simple thing to say because that's just true. But now I'm giving a hypothetical. If this were true, I would have done this, okay? What about prepositions? The trick with prepositions is to just remember them. It's very difficult, and I'm speaking as someone who has a 30-hour course about prepositions. Feel free to check that out. Yes, 30 hours. That's crazy. It's tempting to want to teach rules about prepositions. Oh, if this happens, then use to, and this happens, use in, and if this happens, use for, and of, and from. If it were so simple, it's not. Because sometimes it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And so the only thing you can do there is just learn a bunch of them by example. A lot. Learn them by example. Study them. Learn lots of examples. And you will eventually start to just simply get the feeling for it. That's it. You will get the feeling for it by looking at tons of examples. There's really not much I can say about, learn these rules about prepositions. As soon as you make a rule, then you find another example, it doesn't agree with the rule, and then you're more confused. I say, forget about rules when it comes to prepositions, except for maybe where they go in a sentence, right? The grammar of how they fit into a sentence. But forget about rules when it comes to which one to use. Instead, just learn. Just learn and remember, okay? I'm sorry, that's the bad news. She is good at math. She is good in math. Why is it good at math versus good in math? I don't know. It just is. Again, I don't know why. I am excited about learning more. I am excited for learning more. Well, excited for would be a thing that's going to happen. I'm excited for your birthday party. That would be correct. I'm excited for your birthday party. But then suddenly, if it's an activity, right, and it's an ing verb about learning more. Why? I don't know. He relies on his friends. He relies with his friends. Well, I could say, to rely on is to kind of lean or look for support, and you're kind of on them, right? They're giving you support. So I can try to come up with an explanation that makes it make sense, and if that helps, great. But why is it not he relies with his friends? I don't know. It just isn't. So the bad news here is you just have to look at examples, and this is your excuse to watch movies, read, listen, right? Watch a lot of movies. You'll start to get a feeling for it. Now, in pronunciation, silent letters are sometimes a problem and sometimes not. I've noticed for silent letters at the beginning of a word, most people don't have a problem. Most people don't say, I don't know, knee, right? Or gnome or something like that. People usually have no issues if the silent letter, there are a lot of silent letters in English, is at the start of the word. But if the silent letter is at the end of the word, often it causes problems. Two very common ones, just to pick examples, are debt, D-E-B-T, where people will say debit, which sounds too much like debit, D-E-B-I-T, which is a different word. Or receipt, right? So these T endings, which are spelled weirdly, are common issues, right? I'm just giving examples. There are plenty of others. I hear people say comb, for example, or climb up a hill, climb. We don't pronounce the B in climb, right? And we don't pronounce the B in comb, and we don't pronounce it in debt. We don't pronounce it in receipt, right? That's just how it goes, for whatever reason. It is what it is, okay? Okay, 1 second. Give me 1 second. Okay. Sorry. Oh, good. All right. So just remember for these to learn phonetically. Learn phonetically. That means don't try to learn the pronunciation based on how a word is spelled. Learn the pronunciation based on how it sounds. So whenever you look up a new word, listen to it. Always listen to it. Okay? Moving on. What about word stress? Well, we talked about word stress last week. Yeah. So this is maybe just review, right? But remember that the stress you put on a word can change its meaning. And if you don't stress it correctly, it can cause confusion. So what is the difference between import and import? Well, import would be if it's a noun, and import would be if it's a verb. How about present and present? Well, present if it's a noun, so I give someone a present, right? And present if it's a verb, to present something to a group of people, right? Like presentation, to present to maybe your team, for example. So that's a general kind of rule where if you have a two-syllable word that's a noun or an adjective, then the stress will be on the first syllable. There are exceptions, but generally the stress will be on the first syllable. And if it's a verb spelled the same way, that means the same thing generally, then it's going to be on the second syllable. That's review. For whatever reason, that's just how it is. But if you don't get that right, it can actually cause confusion. Okay? Now, this is one that I'm going to base on personal experience because I don't know what the other ones are, but I know that there are a lot. Your language, your native language, is unique. It makes you think in specific ways. It is the fishbowl that you grow up in. You know, we all grow up in a fishbowl made of language, and it shapes our brains and it shapes how we think. That is true when it comes to specific words. And you might think, oh, well, if I just translate the word, then suddenly I'm going to be able to, into English, I'm going to be able to just say that all the time, as I would in my native language. It's not that simple. There are a lot of words and phrases that are easily translatable, that are correct, which just sound odd, let's say, after you translate them. Right? So that just doesn't quite sound right in English in all of the situations where you would use it in your native language. And that's true between any two languages. Between any two languages, there are differences in usage, in what's common. Okay? So just pay attention to that. I hear it all the time. Just phrases that are odd, that seem out of place, because they're translated phrases from another language. That's just not how it's really used in English. Okay, so you just have to kind of learn that and get feedback, right? And realize that. Maybe by getting feedback, maybe by watching movies or TV shows or reading. So a classic example that I've said many times is in Chinese, the Chinese word, and I say Chinese because I have more experience with Chinese. In Chinese, the verb play is really common, and it's used to mean do things with your friends, right? To like hang out, basically. And so I used to actually get confused when someone would say, hey, do you want to go play later? And I would think, well, what do you mean? Play sports? This would be maybe my students. The cool thing about back when I was a teacher in China, I was a very young teacher, and my students were basically my age. So we always hung out, basically. And so sometimes someone would say, hey, do you want to go play at the mall? And I would say, play at the mall? And I would have to think about it for a second until I kind of learned this. What do you mean play at the mall? Because in my mind, in English, play would be a sport. You would play basketball, you would play golf, you would play tennis, or play would be maybe video games. Play at an arcade, play racing games. Or it's used for kids, right? Kids play with each other. But if we're just going to go to the mall and look around, buy some moccasins or whatever, we're not going to play at the mall. We're just going to hang out at the mall or shop at the mall. And that's not about the word play and its meaning. It's about the usage of that translated word in ordinary English, and that it's just not usually used to talk about the same types of activities as it is in Chinese, right? And when you translate English from English to Chinese, it's the same thing. There are other things that just don't work. Native English speakers want to say similar things that they would say in English in Chinese, and it just sounds weird. Same thing with lights, to open the light, right? Instead of turn off or turn on the light. Maybe eating, this is a common one, eating medicine versus taking medicine. So you eat food, but you take medicine. Why is it that way? I don't know. I don't know why. You don't, even though you put it in your mouth, you're not eating it. You're taking it. You're taking it. My mother-in-law, who lives with me, I take some supplements in the morning, and she says that I'm eating the supplements, and she's kind of made a joke now that it's my breakfast. And that's kind of a funny point between us, right? But there is that difference between eating, and taking. Okay. Now, what about phrasing that just sounds odd? This could be because of, again, maybe a phrase in a native language just doesn't quite work in English or whatever, but odd phrasing is a common thing. Now, this is one of the trickiest issues to work on because it's case by case. You have to learn somehow that this phrase that you're using just doesn't sound natural, even though it's maybe technically, grammatically correct sometimes. Whatever reason, it just doesn't sound right. There, ChatGPT can be a great tool If you're writing something, if you want to have a spoken conversation, get feedback from ChatGPT, not just on what is incorrect, but what might sound odd phrasing. Get feedback on that too. So we might say, for example, I very like this movie. I really like this movie. Don't those mean the same thing? Well, yes, but for whatever reason, if we use very, it would be I like this movie very much. And if it's really, I can put it after I really like this movie. So really goes before like, and very goes after like. For whatever reason. Why? I don't know. How about this? She is really boring. Okay? So the word boring is the right word, but we also have to remember that the form matters. Boring, bored. Boring, bored. Boring, bored. If something is boring, then it is the thing that is causing me to feel that way. This movie is so boring. This meeting is so boring, right? Maybe this game is so boring. This book is so boring. But if I then talk about myself, how I feel, then I'm bored. Why? Because of the book. So the movie, the book, they are boring. Because of that, I am bored. Bored. I'm bored. I'm bored. I'm bored. Okay, if I say the sentence, I am boring, she is boring, that is correct. But what it means is not that she feels that way. What it means is that other people feel she is that way. Other people feel I am that way. I'm boring suggests that maybe I live an uninteresting life, and if people would hang out with me, they would realize it's not that fun because I don't do anything interesting. And they feel bored because I'm boring, right? Generally, that's how it works, okay? Now, a couple other points. This one's tough to talk about, and I can't give a great example, but when it comes to structuring sentences and using commas, it's really important to not be afraid to end a sentence, right? So if I say, I went to the store, I bought some milk, then I went home and made dinner with my family, that's what's called a run-on sentence. When you have a run-on sentence, people get confused because everything's flowing together and it's all mixed up and it's kind of hard to process the information. But if you say, I went to the store to buy some milk, then I went home and made dinner for my family, that simple break to break the sentences in two changes everything. Suddenly, it's much easier for me to process what's going on, to process the information. This is a big issue for people, especially when it comes to using commas versus periods. If you're writing a lot and you just use commas, but you're afraid to end a sentence, then the reader is going to get exhausted by the sentence. It is okay to write short sentences. I went to the store, period, end of sentence. I bought some milk, period, end of sentence. Then I made dinner for my family, period, end of sentence. That's fine. Now, if you do only short sentences, yes, that's a problem too. A syntax problem. But, pay attention to writing because the way you write really affects how people feel about you, how they judge you or don't judge you. When I read people's writing, honestly now when I read someone's writing, if it isn't perfect, I judge it. And that used to not be true of non-native English speakers. It used to be, of course, it's not going to be perfect. It's not your first language. That's fine. If you make some mistakes, I'll help you. But now, it has to be perfect because now there are no excuses. Now you can do your best to write something and then just ask ChatGPT to make it better, more clear, and it should be fixed. It should be fixed. It should have perfect punctuation, perfect grammar, If you don't do that, then what do you? I don't know why. It's a tool that's available, right? Grammarly couldn't make it perfect. ChatGPT can, and actually, Apple Intelligence can as well. Apple Intelligence, the new writing tool in Apple Intelligence, can make your writing pretty much perfect. It's not as good as ChatGPT in my opinion, but it can do the job. Finally, articles. Articles, and the. Common to mix up, especially what we call the definite and indefinite article. So the definite article is the table. I'm talking about a specific table. The light, I'm talking about a specific light, right? The movie, I'm talking about a specific movie. A light, I'm talking about some light, right? A movie, I'm talking about, I don't know which movie. I don't know. If I say I want to watch a movie, then I'm thinking of no movie in particular. I don't know yet. Let's talk about it. If I want to watch the movie you mentioned yesterday, then I'm talking about a specific movie. And it's very important to get that right because it can cause a lot of confusion when your articles are mixed up. Now, the difference between and an, a and an, is simply whether or not the next word starts with a vowel sound. Not a vowel, a vowel sound. So if I say an hour, I say an hour, not because of how it starts. It starts with an H, H-O-U-R, but because of how it sounds. It doesn't sound like hour, it sounds like hour. It's a vowel sound, even though there's an H there. So that's why it's an hour, right, instead of a hour, right? I think then, I wonder, there's another word which starts with an H. Americans say it as herb. And so we would say an herb. But Brits say herb. So I think they would say a herb. A herb. I guess they have to. I think they have to, yeah. I'm not sure about that, but I'm pretty sure. So just a couple of examples. Hand me a pen, hand me the pen. They're both correct, but what do you mean? If you don't care which pen you get, hand me a pen. If you care which pen you get, hand me the pen. Because there are three and I want the blue one, right? She wants an answer to the question. She wants the answer to the question. Again, both correct. It depends on what you mean. An answer to the question is, I have a question. Tell me what you think. It doesn't matter what you say. She wants the answer to the question means maybe there's only one correct answer and you need to say what it is, right? So there's only one answer. It's the answer. 47. He is looking for the solution. He is looking for a solution. Both correct. The solution means there's only one solution. A solution would be a problem where there could be many different solutions. I haven't found any of them. But if I find one, then I will use that. That will be the answer, right? That will be the answer to this problem, although there could have been other answers, right? So that's why maybe someone would say he's looking for a solution. All correct, but it just depends on what you mean. Okay, that is it for common issues that English learners have when speaking English, when writing English as well, especially in the case of sentence composition and syntax and using commas correctly, run-on sentences, because those are usually written. But if you have any questions about this, let me know. If you haven't done so already, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe and get a free course in the links in the description. Alrighty. All right. Back to here. And we're going to be looking at, in a moment, after I get some water, a clip. Donald Trump won the 2024 presidential election against Kamala Harris. It was not particularly close. People thought it would be. As you can see, I have a tiny little cup. A tiny cup. People thought it would be close. The polls said it was going to be close. A lot of people said Kamala would win. A lot of people said Trump would win. As it got closer, the betting markets said that Trump would win. But then Trump came out on top. And, well, they were right. And some people were wrong. Some people were right. Some people are sad. Some people are happy. I don't have a very strong emotion about it one way or the other. But that's what it is. And so we're going to look at a clip of the announcement from a news network. And we're going to pick out some language from there. So let's hop over here. Let's do that. Let us go over to this. This is from Associated Press, I think is where I got this from, if I'm not mistaken. Where did I get this from? I forgot my source. Oh, yeah, Associated Press. That's right. Okay, here we go. Here we go. We're going to watch it. We're going to pull out language as we go along.
Live from Washington, here is Meg Kennard.
This is a breaking alert that has just moved on the AP wire. The Associated Press has called the presidency for Republican Donald Trump. The Associated Press has called the presidency for Republican Donald Trump.
The Associated Press has called the presidency. So this is an interesting one. If someone calls it, does that mean call someone on the phone? No. To call it, in this case, is to make a clear announcement with a result of some kind. And so two competitors are, fiercely battling, and there are judges involved. And finally, there has to be a decision about who got more points. Well, the judges called it in favor of person A as opposed to person B. In an election, it's the same. They're competing. They're trying to get votes. The votes are going up and up. I'll explain that in a second. And at some point, it becomes clear that candidate A will never be able to, even though maybe not everything is counted. I think there are still votes being counted today as I say this. But no matter what, one person has gone ahead of the other, and the other person cannot catch them. It's impossible. It's maybe mathematically impossible. So at that point, you can call it. You say, I'm going to call it. It's kind of like saying, I'm going to call it a day. Basically, that's saying, that's enough. We're done. This is the answer. This is the result. And if you're right about that, if you're right about an outcome that you predicted that Trump will win, and he does, you would say, I called it. I called it. I called it. Now, you would say that, meaning I predicted it successfully. So here they're not predicting it so much. They're basically saying it is over. This is the result. But you can also use it to talk about your prediction, right? When you successfully predicted something. I called it a week ago, remember? And then a week ago, you can say, I'm calling it now. Trump will win. I'm calling it now. To call it now is to make the prediction. I'm calling it now. Okay? That's basically saying, here's what I think is going to happen. Now, you could be wrong. You could say, I'm calling it, Kamala will win by 30%. And that could be wrong. That would be wrong if you did say that, right? So you can use it to make predictions. You can use it to talk about previous predictions, and you can use it to kind of announce the results when things maybe were predicted in a competitive situation, okay? A call has a lot of different meanings, and that's just one of them. All right. Let's keep going.
This call comes after the AP determined that Trump was the winner of the battleground state of Wisconsin, whose 10 electoral votes put him over the threshold. Whose 10 electoral votes put him over the threshold of the 270 needed to be winner of the battleground. Comes after the AP determined that Trump was the winner of the battleground state of Wisconsin.
The battleground state of Wisconsin. So what is a battleground state? This is a specifically political thing that happens in the United States around elections. The way that it works in a presidential election is basically that people vote for the president and other things too by filling in a little square on a ballot. The ballot is the thing that they put their vote on. And people do that. People make that vote within their state. Now, they are not voting directly for the president. In the United States, this is how it works. So, as a result, it's not like the president is elected by counting up all of the votes from everywhere and then saying, well, this person got more. Okay, I'm calling it now, right? Instead, what happens is the majority of votes within each state make the whole state, let's say, go toward that candidate. And they get all of the electoral votes of that state. So if 51% of people vote for Donald Trump in this state, and the other remaining 49 vote for Kamala, then Trump wins the state, the whole state. Now, that state will be worth a certain number of what are called electoral votes. Electoral votes. And electoral votes are like points. Think of it like points, based on the population of the state. So California and New York are worth a lot of electoral votes because they have large populations, whereas Montana or something don't have that many electoral votes because the population is smaller. So it's not about the physical size, it's about the population. And so what the candidates are competing for to win the presidency is not just the votes of people, but rather electoral votes of states. And so then we get back to what a battleground state is. Oops, where's that one? Battleground state. So a battleground state is a state that could go either way, whereas other states are pretty much just always one way or the other. New York State is we call a blue state. It always votes in the presidential election in favor of the Democratic candidate. It is a blue state. That doesn't mean nobody in the state votes for the red candidate, the Republican candidate. It means that there are always more people voting for the Democratic candidate. And so it's just always blue. So it's not a battleground state because, okay, everyone knows that that's going to be blue. Whereas in other states, like Florida, for example, or Iowa, and I believe Pennsylvania is one, it could go this way or that way. We don't know. So the candidates will spend tons of money campaigning in those states known as battleground states because they need the electoral votes. If it's 50-50 and then one candidate gets a little bit more than the other, right? And more people vote for this candidate just by like 3,000 votes. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny lead. They win all of the electoral votes from that state. All of them. That's how it works. And so not all states are battleground states. Not all states are battleground states. New York, California, not battleground states. Texas, not a battleground state, right? Let's keep going. So let's go back. Let's just rewatch that now that I've explained that.
This call comes after the AP determined that Trump was the winner of the battleground state of Wisconsin, whose 10 electoral votes.
So now you know electoral votes. Okay, battleground state of Wisconsin, whose 10 electoral votes. Again, 10 sounds like a small number. Well, you only need 270 to win. So once Trump passed 270, then he's got it. It's over.
put him over the threshold of the 270 needed to be declared the winner of the race for the White House.
The threshold
Vote counting
of the 270. So if you look at this chart up here on this map, Kamala here, not all the votes are counted. It's some are still counting, it looks like. They're still working on it, right? Leading but not finished counting. But it's impossible, once a candidate crosses 270, for them to lose to the other person. So they call it before it's over. They call it before it's completely over. As I said, it's Friday now. They're still counting votes. But they called it because there's nothing that Kamala Harris could do to win. Because once you cross 270 electoral votes, that is a threshold. It can be called. It's over. So a threshold is an important line that you go over or don't go over. You may want to stay under a threshold or perhaps go over a threshold depending on the situation, right? Once you go over a certain threshold of, let's say, I don't know, money in the bank, you never need to work again. Let's say that number is, I don't know, that's probably different for different people. But a certain amount of money that you have will generate enough interest, let's say, right, to basically give you back each year your entire cost of living, right? And because it gives you your entire cost of living in interest, the total amount maybe won't go down. And so you have crossed an important threshold, right? There are all kinds of thresholds. As crossing them may be bad or good. But in this case, 270, that is a very important threshold. And once it is crossed, then we can call the winner of the election. Okay? That's the idea.
Some states is still ongoing. At this hour, counting in some states is still ongoing.
And it is now Friday, and I think some states are still counting. I could be wrong about that.
At this hour, we do have an update on the electoral votes for each candidate. Trump has 277, and Democrat Kamala Harris has 224. This is a moment of history for the United States.
Okay, now Trump says it in a very weird way. This phrase, this is a moment of history. The phrase that people use is usually, this is a historic moment. I don't think I've ever heard someone say this is a moment of history. So I highlight this just to say, actually, what people will say here usually is, this is a historic moment. Okay? Why? Well, she's going to explain why in a second. But I'm going to bring up some phrases now, not that she said, but that I think she should have said, that would have been better, right, that she doesn't use. So she should have said, I think, this is a historic moment, instead of a moment of history, which is a bit awkward.
To return to the White House, 277, and Democrat Kamala Harris has 224. This is a moment of history for the United States. Trump is only the second U.S. president ever elected to return to the White House after losing it. He's also
the second president to return to the White House after losing it. Another way of saying that is non-consecutive. So typically what happens is you have, for the president, you have what are called terms. Each term is 4 years. 4-year term. And what happens is, as a president, you can serve 2 terms. Can, but you may not. You may have 1 term, and then an opponent comes along and beats you, and you don't win a second term. If you do win a second term, like George Bush, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, right? Then what you have is consecutive terms. So you have 1, and then immediately after another. 4, totaling 8. Used to be there wasn't a specific limit. That's why the President Franklin D. Roosevelt served, I think, 3.5. He won 4 terms as president because people kept voting for him to serve another term. But then there was a rule passed, and now it's limited to 2 terms. So If it's 4 and then 4, those would be 2 consecutive terms. But what happened was Trump was president, then he lost the presidency to Joe Biden. Biden was president for 4 years, and now Trump is going to be president again. So he's serving 2 terms, but they're not consecutive terms, okay? And the only other president to do that in history was a fella named Grover Cleveland, who was president from 1885 to 1889, and then again from 1893 to 1897. Grover Cleveland. So it's Trump and Grover Cleveland. They're in a special class, special and unique class.
The first president elected after being convicted on dozens of felony charges. Trump campaigned heavily on several issues.
You hear felony,
among them
just hear
reform.
basically crimes, right? A felony is a crime, usually a serious crime, and you're being charged with a crime. You're being charged with a felony. That means you're being accused of that, right? Basically, someone is bringing that against you, perhaps into court, right? It's a legal matter. Often, if it is a felony, there is potential prison time involved, right? If it's not, then it may be if it's more minor, a misdemeanor instead of a felony. But if you're convicted, that means that a judge or a jury said you are guilty, not just that you were charged with a felony. You can be charged with a felony and say, I'm totally innocent. And maybe you are. Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. And then maybe there's a legal process, like maybe a trial. And there's a jury, perhaps, and the jury listens to the trial, and they say, guilty. Well, now you have been convicted of the felony charges. You've been convicted. It may be that you're still innocent. You could say, I was wrongly convicted, right? Maybe, but it happens. But she's making the point that, well, Trump, 2 things. Number 1, he's been convicted of felony charges, and number 2, he was the second non-consecutive president. And for that reason, it's a historic moment. Okay.
Trump campaigned heavily on several issues, among them reform of the U.S. immigration system and the economy, both of which he framed as areas in which Americans are suffering during a Democratic presidential.
Immigration reform would be to make changes, hopefully improvements. It's supposed to be improvements to something. Reform would be to improve that, to make improvements, to fix an issue. Okay, so you'll hear people say, I don't know, reform the rules, immigration reform, let's say maybe process reform, reform the process. Reform is to make improvements of something, perhaps over time or sometimes immediately. You hear it a lot in politics.
A Democratic presidential administration. Data from AP VoteCast system and the economy, both of which he framed as areas in which Americans are suffering during a Democratic presidential administration. Data from AP VoteCast.
Administration is the group of people who are, let's say, running something, right? Admin refers to the day-to-day process of handling and running an organization or something technical, right? Admin is people, the people or the processes kind of at the top, handling and running and managing everything else. And so the same thing, we refer to the president and his cabinet or the people around him as his or her administration. And so it's not the whole country. It's kind of the leadership team that this person selects who help them carry out their plans and reforms and goals or whatever. So you would say the Trump administration. It's often how you refer to each one. The Trump administration, the Biden administration.
Presidential administration. Data from AP VoteCast shows us that Trump supporters were largely motivated on these 2 issues. In addition to that live voting map that you can see on your screen, there is also in the lower right-hand corner Mar-a-Lago, which is Donald Trump's Florida home.
Mar-a-Lago, can't really see it clearly. That's where he lives in Florida.
And in the lower left, the White House, to which he is now set to return next year.
He is set to return. What does that mean?
This left, the White House, to which he is now set to return next year. This marks the end of AP's Election Night live stream program. Thank you for joining us for this inaugural broadcast. You can always find updates on AP's election.
So if you say set to return, that means that's what is going to happen. That's the plan, right? I'm set to arrive at 6:30. I'm set to return next week. It's usually not for today and what time something is going to happen, but it's usually for maybe I'm set to fly out next week and I'll be gone for a few days and then I'll come back. That's the plan. That's the agenda. That's what's going to happen. So it's not like when you win the election in November, you just move in. Biden will still serve the rest of his term. The Biden administration will continue until January. And then in January, Trump will move from Mar-a-Lago back to the White House. And he will serve his term as president in the White House. So he's set to return refers to the future. I'm set to do this. We're set to. The plan is in place. It is locked in. It is kind of confirmed. It's going to happen. It gives it a sense of certainty and clarity, basically saying this thing is coming up in the future, but obviously hasn't happened yet. Okay, now she says something that I was a little confused about.
Election night live stream. And in the lower left, the White House, to which he is now set to return next year. This marks the end of AP's Election Night live stream program. Thank you for joining us for this inaugural broadcast. You can always find updates.
So inaugural means, usually, and I'm just going to define it, marking the beginning of an institution, activity, or period. So I was confused at first. Why is she saying the word inaugural? Because inaugural is a presidential word, or a word that's used often related to presidential stuff, which is the beginning of the presidency. You have an inauguration. The inauguration is a ceremony at which the president is, puts his or her hand on the Bible or something and swears in as president. That is called the inauguration. The inauguration. It's a process. It's a ceremony, a formal thing. And it's the beginning of the presidency. That's why it's called that. That's what inaugural means. So this then doesn't refer to that because the inauguration is 2 months away. So this must be AP's first time doing this kind of stream. It's just a little bit formal, right? It's very formal. It's a formal word. It's a process word. It's a serious word. And it is, yes, the first time we're doing this. It's like saying, thank you for joining us at our very first presidential stream. I don't know what's wrong with saying very first presidential stream. She says inaugural stream. In my opinion, it's a strange word to use here because it's so formal. Why doesn't she just say, thank you for joining us for our first presidential stream? I don't know why. But she says inaugural, which is the only thing that could possibly mean.
Election night live stream program. Thank you for joining us for this inaugural broadcast. You can always find updates on AP's election coverage at apnews.com, where we will continue to bring you political news in all formats, as well as more race calls in the contest.
Okay, we don't need the full thing. Thank you so much. That's great. I appreciate that. Omar says, I just wanted to tell you that I watched your videos for a while, about 8 years ago when I was learning, and want to thank you so much for playing such a big role in my learning journey. Wow, Omar, that's such a nice thing to say. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Omar. Thank you so much. It's always great to hear that kind of thing. You really helped me get where I am now. Wow. Wow, that's wonderful. That makes me feel great. That makes my day. It makes my weekend. Well, on that note, what a nice note to end on. I want to thank Omar, everyone joining, everyone watching. Thank you for joining. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it. Hopefully you learned some things about common mistakes today and some useful language from the video we looked at. Again, I appreciate it. If you have any questions that I didn't get to or I didn't answer, let me know in the comments. I would appreciate a small thing you can do to show a lot of support. Hit the like button and subscribe. That is, again, a little thing you can do, which is a huge, huge, huge support. Basically, it says, hey, other people should watch this too, and that really helps the channel grow. It helps the podcast grow. So thank you for doing that, and feel free to check out the mistakes course. First link in the description. That course is in there. That is, I think, a good course. Underrated, really underrated. It's not my most popular course, but I think it's good. I think it's a good one. Check that out as well. Let's see. What else? Get a free course in the links in the description too. That's Natural English Conversations. You can sign up for the updates there as well from me. You can join the Discord. You can listen to the podcast version audio if you want to. Search Cloud English on any podcast platform, or you can watch every Friday in the early afternoon on YouTube and Facebook. Again, thank you all. I appreciate it. Good luck as you continue your English learning journey. Have a fantastic rest of the week, and I will see you in the next one.